Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark.
And I'm Randy.
Today we're taking a look at Blight Chronicles, Agent Decker.
In Blight Chronicles, Agent Decker, you play as an agent in a secret government project, where your goal is to accomplish specific tasks and ultimately complete an important mission. Blight Chronicles, Agent Decker is brought to you by Board and Dice. It's a single-player game for ages 14 and up, and each game takes 1 to 2 hours to play.
Great, well let's see if we can infiltrate and avoid suspicion. Alright, before we jump into this game, we have to tell you that this is a solo experience, and it is very story-driven. It is also a deck builder, so there's a lot of things in the story that we are going to gloss over and not go into depth because we don't want to ruin the experience for all of you.
In Blight Chronicles, you're playing a mission that's made up of 7 stages. Each game consists of 1 stage. Now, at the beginning of each stage, you will get a card that explains the specific types of obstacles you will be encountering, as well as the specific objective and the failure condition.
Right.
Based upon the specified type of obstacles, you will fill in these 6 slots, which indicate the sort of people and guards and detection devices that you'll have to overcome to get to your ultimate objective.
Now, like we said, this is a deck builder. You're going to take your set of agent cards. There's a basic set of these. Now, in the first stage, you just start with some real basic stuff. But as you progress through the game, you'll have some leveled up cards. But ultimately, you will still start with a subset of cards that you can build upon in that stage. Also, based on the stage you're in, you're going to set up the visibility and the suspicion tracker. And potentially, some of this might carry over from a previous stage. So you have to be careful about being seen at all times. Also, the board has lots of reference points showing you what all the icons mean on different cards and showing you what the round sequence is. And there's also a place for equipment, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right, let's quickly talk about the anatomy of an agent card. So these are the cards that you're going to be playing throughout the game from your hand into the play area. So they each have a title. So these in particular, we have a punch and a silent movement. You notice in the top left corner of these cards, there are symbols. There's a hexagon and a triangle. The hexagons are in blue. The triangles are in red. The hexagons mean evasion, and the triangles are force or power.
Yeah, physical
attack,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
And then the number is your power level for these cards. Now, the cards also have some effects that they can perform as well, and that's below the title.
And those effects might involve discarding other cards to get more power,
right,
or doing things to decrease your suspicion level, because as Mark said, that's really important in the game, and oftentimes that's what your failure criteria is.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Now let's take a look at the obstacle cards. Obstacle cards are interesting in the sense that they have 2 halves. They have an upper half and a lower half. Let's first talk about the lower half. Here on the dividing line, you'll see an icon here, and this indicates what set of cards this obstacle is from.
Right.
When you set up the stage, you will take cards from a variety of sets, you'll shuffle them together, and that will make the deck of obstacles you'll be playing for that particular stage. Below that, you'll see the name of the particular obstacle. There's a symbol beside it that shows the type of obstacle it is. There's a symbol next to that that indicates what is required for the agent to target this particular obstacle. If the number here shows just a red triangle, it indicates that only physical force can be used against this obstacle. If there's only a blue hexagon, it indicates that only evasion can be used to target this. And if there are both symbols, then it means you can play a combination of physical force and evasion to target this particular card. Now, over in the lower right, you'll see a circle here. It's kind of a yellow-orange circle. That indicates what happens if this is avoided. This actually adds to your suspicion. So you have to be very careful about this. We'll talk about what it means to avoid a card a little bit later. But down here in the lower right, at the very bottom of the card, or lower left rather, bottom of the card, is something that varies between these obstacle cards and is very important because this is their special effect. Some cards come into play and they have this reveal icon. This one is green here, and that means do something special the minute you turn it over.
Yep.
Other ones have special effects once they are avoided or once they are eliminated.
Right.
And the type of these cards, or the special effect, will be very important in how you play your agent cards and which obstacle you choose to target.
Yeah. Yep.
Each turn in Blight Chronicles consists of 5 phases. We'll talk about them one at a time. The first one is called Engage, and that's where you play your agent cards into the play area and then target particular obstacles.
Right.
Now, you start out with a max hand size of 4 cards, so you're somewhat limited with what you can play. You're not required to play all of them, and there may be reasons you save them.
Right.
So, for example, you might say, well, I really need a lot of points. I don't have enough right now, so maybe I'll save my big pointers now and target something small.
Yep.
And maybe the reverse of that as well.
Reverse, yeah.
In any case, we talked about targeting. The way you target a card is you look at the number in the lower right that has either a red triangle or a blue hexagon or a combination of both, and you play cards that equal that. So if it's a red triangle, you play physical force cards. If it's a blue hexagon, you play evasion cards, and if it's a combination of both, you can play a combination of the 2 types of cards. Now, here's a key. You can only do that for the ones that are nearby.
Yeah.
If they are further away, so slots 1 and 2 are nearby or close by. Slots 3 and 4 are a little bit further away, so those require 1 additional evasion beyond what's shown on the card.
Yep.
And then slots 5 and 6 require 2 additional evasions, so as though they weren't expensive enough as they were. So you may have to wait for some key cards to move closer to you before you can take action on them. Now, once you can target a card, what's key here is that you have a choice between what they call knocking out these cards and eliminating them. So knocking them out simply involves turning them over. Yep. And they'll move down the path and not have any further effect. So there's reasons you might do that. But the benefit of eliminating them is you actually take them into your hand. Yep. So this is a deck builder, yep. And you may say, hey, there's one I really want, so I will, instead of knocking it out, it's worth pursuing, I'm going to add it to my hand. And it doesn't go directly to your hand, it goes to your discard pile.
Like
and then, when you shuffle, it will eventually come back into your hand.
Right.
Now, there are some cards that do have effects when you eliminate them. And if you look at this guard right here, this is a security guard, and his benefit, he doesn't have any special powers. Many of these cards have special powers in the top half, and you might say, I really want that, like discard another card and decrease your suspicion, as we said. This one just has a slightly elevated physical force, but his special power is when you eliminate him, he increases the visibility by 1, and we'll explain to you in a bit why that's bad.
It's bad.
So you have to be wary about what's going on and which ones you choose, because there may be negative consequences.
There's definitely benefits to getting more cards to your hand because you're definitely with a pretty limited set to start with.
They're not strong,
and
you need to be much stronger. Now, the reason you're targeting these obstacles is not because those are part of your end objective, but your end objective tends to be very difficult to achieve, and so
absolutely,
by targeting these obstacles and bringing them to your hand, it makes it possible for you to do what's necessary to achieve the end objective. And in many cases, you simply couldn't play enough points in your initial starting hand to get enough points to target your end objective.
Exactly.
And some of these cards, to do that, most of the time your objectives require you to obtain these particular star tokens. And key obstacles will allow you to do that.
Indeed. And the second phase is Reorganize, and just like any good deck builder, you're going to draw more cards. Now, if your draw pile is out of cards, then you have to shuffle all your discards. And this is good and bad. You get more cards, but your visibility is going to move down the track. Now, if your visibility is maxed out at 4, then every time you shuffle your deck until you reduce your visibility, you're also going to be increasing suspicion every time you have to shuffle that deck. So there's definitely reasons to keep an eye on that visibility and mess with it throughout the game.
And that's the trade-off here. You might say, I really want to keep my deck thin. And those of us who like reducing our deck size for that purpose, there's a reason to do it. But then you have to shuffle a lot
more often. Yeah. All right, so phase 3 is the avoid phase. Now, this phase is interesting because if you have dealt with the cards in slots 1 and 2 and they're gone, you totally avoid this phase altogether. Now, if both cards are face up in slot 1 and 2, then you have to avoid the card in slot 1, which will move it to the avoided obstacle pile, flip it face down, and you will take suspicion, which is the bottom number on the card in the right. It will tell you how much suspicion to move the tracker up. So that's not really great sometimes. Now, if you've dealt with one of these cards already, and one is face down and one is face up, then it's your choice which one is avoided.
Right.
So, and again, it will move to the avoided obstacle pile. And finally, if there's only one card out there in slot 1 or 2, be face up or face down, again, this is the card you have to use to avoid, and it moves to the avoided obstacle pile. Now, when you move a card to the avoided obstacle pile that is face up and it has a purple icon in the bottom, that is an oversight. Oversight triggers when this happens, and there's many different effects they have. So for this particular example, we have system knowledge. This card, when its oversight activates, you're going to gain 1 suspicion on the suspicion track for every electronic device that's in play. So that's pretty bad, right? So there's a lot of different possibilities for these oversights. So again, you have to be very mindful when dealing with the cards. You're like, oh man, if I take care of this card, then that means I'm going to have these effects happen later.
And this is probably the biggest determining factor when choosing which card to target and whether to eliminate or knock them out. So for example, let's say you eliminated one of these cards. You say, I really want this in my hand. That's great. But then when it comes to avoiding a card, there's only one card left. This card's face up, so terrible things may happen. And not only could it trigger bad things here, this one doesn't have an oversight, but the oversight's something you always want to watch for. But then it creates 2 empty slots. And so what that means is these cards are going to flow down much faster. Now, after the avoiding phase, what happens is what they call the move phase. And everything moves down from the furthest slots to the nearest slots, and then those the empty slots get re-added as part of the look around.
And if there's any reveal icons when these new cards come out, then more bad things
can happen. Exactly. So what you're doing as you're choosing which things to target, you can't just consider which ones have the effects or the powers that would work best in your hand.
Right.
You're also trying to do damage control because there's, as Mark said, there's the oversight icons that are going to have impacts if you let them get down here in face up mode. But there's also things that are called threats. So these are ongoing effects that are triggered based upon other things happening. And those other things could be, hey, when a particular type of card gets avoided, maybe it causes additional suspicion to get added because there's somebody else here. So for example, maybe there's a surveillance operator that's keeping track of all the electronic devices. And if an electronic device gets avoided, then he says, oh, all of a sudden the screen went blank, so I'm going to add a suspicion to the counter. So these are all things you're trying to keep track of.
There's a lot to balance.
There is.
And a lot to pay attention to.
So if for those of you concerned that, hey, it's a solo game, how engaging can it be?
Very engaging.
It's very engaging. So after you finish the avoiding, as we said, everything moves down the track. Things that are further away get closer, and therefore they don't have the additional evasion cost. And then the last thing you would do as part of the turn would be add things to the end of the slots, or the furthest away slots. So we went through that fairly quickly, but those are the 5 phases of a standard turn. There's engage, where you play your cards. There is reorganize, where you redraw. There's avoid, where one of the 2 cards in the close by area, slots 1 and 2, get avoided. There is move, where everything, whatever gap has been created here, all the cards move down. And then lastly, there's look around, where additional cards get added toward the furthest away slots. And whatever effects there are associated with turning those cards over, those come into play there. Now, we haven't mentioned a particular area of the board, and these are 1st, 2nd, and 3rd marks. Now, these tend to represent areas that are more stationary obstacles. A lot of times, those are maybe more difficult to achieve. Oftentimes, they're stage-related obstacles. And sometimes things that are coming down the obstacle track might actually end up here when they hit their oversight ability as they're being avoided. But so these are also things you can target. You cannot knock them out. You can only eliminate them. But oftentimes they're harder and involve completing that particular stage. Now, one thing we didn't mention during the final phase of a turn, and that's where you look around, that's when you determine whether you've succeeded or failed, or you check.
Check.
Now, you just do the check at that point in time. The check might be, hey, The failure condition is having more than 15 suspicion, and that's the first failure condition. And if you do at that particular point in time, there's no chance to reduce it at that point in time. You're just over. It's just over.
You go to the end and you're like, well, I guess I'm not a good agent after all.
But there's also the opportunity to check whether you've succeeded. So if you have, then you've succeeded at that stage, and the stage is complete.
Now, also at the bottom of the board is some equipment. Things you can hold with a hand icon and outfits you can wear. Why is this important? Because you get special abilities for things like Iron Knuckles will give you a permanent +1 on your physical abilities, which is worth having. And then you can change outfits, guard outfits, or some other outfit throughout the game that you may acquire. And what's really interesting about this is that every time you change your outfit and you re-equip a new card, then you get to reduce your visibility by 2. So it's a really valuable way to back that off from continually gaining suspicion if you've maxed it out. So
and that's thematic, is the idea. If you're constantly
thematic.
Changing clothes, people are going, well, wasn't this guy wearing a mechanic's outfit before? Yeah.
So keep an eye out for those gear items, because that might be an instance where I really got to get that gear and grab it so I can equip it for later use. And finally, once you complete a stage, then you take the stage card, and you flip it over. Now, again, we'll try not to spoil too much story stuff here, but there's definitely some interesting story bits to lead you into the next part of the mission. And a lot of the time, there's a choose your own adventure kind of style at the bottom, giving you a different path to go to a different stage and so forth. So it really keeps some variability, trying some different paths and trying some different things.
After you've read the narrative on the back of the stage card, you'll definitely want to make a note of where your suspicion is on the board if you're not going to continue playing another stage immediately. Because the suspicion does not reset between stages, as Mark said earlier in this preview. Unless it's indicated, right. So as you're playing, suspicion is very important to keep as low as possible.
Yes, indeed, throughout.
Yeah, so you'll want to, if you're
without spoiling the story, what happens is that you're infiltrating this particular base,
right?
And it's just an ongoing story, right?
Yeah.
So
there's stage after stage after stage. Exactly. So you'll make a note of this. You'll gather up all the particular obstacle cards that are both still showing, as well as the ones that are in the deck here and the ones that have been avoided. And you'll divide them into their particular sets, because, again, for each stage, they specify the type of obstacle cards that you'll be playing with. Now, you will also gather up your agent cards, and that includes the ones that are still in the pile, the ones that are in the play area, the one that are discards pile, and the obstacles that you have added to your agent deck stay with you unless you've been captured, in which case you have to give them up. But
not that we were captured.
No, not that we were captured or anything like that. But otherwise, the obstacle cards stay with your agent deck, with one exception. Any cards that you have dropped throughout the course of a stage stay dropped. They don't stay with your agent deck. They also don't go back to the obstacle deck. So, for example, I think this is true for some outfits, that if you drop the outfit when putting on a new one, that outfit's out for the remainder of the mission. So after you've gathered up all your obstacle cards, gathered up all your agent cards, when you're ready to play the next round or next stage, you will go to your mission card and you will move up your marker, indicating that you are ready to play the next stage.
All right, folks, reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So the rules and artwork and everything might still be in flux, so keep a close eye on the campaign. Now, that said, I really like the thematicness of this game. You really feel like you're an agent and infiltrating a base. So that was definitely a plus for me.
Now, Mark and I have reviewed or previewed games that can be played with a single player before, but we have never reviewed or previewed one that was only a solo game.
Yeah, right.
So this was a pleasant surprise for us. And in fact, we played it co-op.
You can actually do that, which worked really well.
We sat side by side and just kind of said, well, you want to target that thing, you want to target this thing. So there was a lot of good discussion on it. And so for people who are saying, well, I'm never really by myself, but if you are and you want a tactile alternative to playing something on your iPad or computer, I think this was, as he said, a pleasant surprise in the sense that there was this sense of engagement to where you're going, wow, I really have some tough decisions to make here.
Yep, and things ramp up quickly on you.
They
too.
do.
It's pretty, and I like the story bits. Like I said, it's very thematic. So that's typically right up my alley.
It is.
So, folks, if this looks like a game that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they would appreciate your support.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it from us. And until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.